On this episode of Retro Car Guy 530, we're going to check out the Freewell all-day 8-pack of neutral density filters and circular polarizing lenses, including the hybrid versions on this DJI Mini 2. So, let's get into it. Now that I own a DJI Mini 2 drone, I want to make sure I had a good set of neutral density filters for the camera on that drone. And this kit also includes the circular polarizing lenses. Since they're both in the same kit, I thought I'd go ahead and get it. And this is the Freewell all-day 8-pack. We have a neutral density filter with no CPL here. This is an ND4, ND8. The ND16 is on the camera of the drone right now, and I'll show you in just a moment. Then we have a circular polarizing lens here that has no neutral density filter. And then the front row here are the combo units. We have a ND8, 16, 32, and 64 with the circular polarizing lenses. And the circular polarizing lens, or a CPL, is useful to reduce the glare from a reflective surface, such as a body of water or glass or something that's highly reflective. Depending on the angle you're at from a particular surface, it can become very reflective. So if you encounter a situation like that, a CPL is helpful in reducing that. You do have to rotate the lens to target the particular light coming in to reduce it. So it can be a challenge to reduce that while you have the drone in your hands and have it up in the air. You won't be able to change anything. So I don't tend to use CPLs, but since this kit already included it, I thought I might as well go ahead and get it. And then, like I said, this is a CPL by itself, no neutral density filter whatsoever. And then, of course, we have the neutral density filters here, no CPLs. And you might be asking, what's a neutral density filter? Why would you even need one? Now, in the case of a camera, the general photography rule is that human eye can see motion blur, and that occurs in normal real life. And to maintain that in photography, you have to have the frames per second and shutter speed adjusted such that it will maintain that. So based on a Mini 2, I have the front camera. I'll be recording at 4K 30 frames per second. To maintain the normal motion blur, or if you're filming in the more cinematic 24 frames per second, basically whatever the frames per second value is, you double that. That becomes the divisor in the shutter speed. So since I'm recording at 4K 30 frames per second on this particular camera usually, I will be setting the shutter speed to 1/60. And then that will preserve the normal motion blur that the human eye will perceive in the video that I capture. So for that to be true, then if you set the shutter speed to that value, usually that lets in a large amount of light, and that will overexpose the video image on the image sensor of the camera. And the camera, if you have it in automatic mode, will automatically adjust either the ISO. In the case of a lot of light, it'll set that to 100. And then it'll adjust the shutter speed to a much higher value. That divisor value will go up dramatically to reduce the amount of light. So the higher the shutter speed, the divisor of the shutter, it's letting in less and less light to basically compensate or let less light into the image sensor to give the proper exposure. But in that case, when you're creating a video, you won't see that motion blur because it'll be so sharp, it won't have the motion blur in what it's capturing. So to keep that in there, that's why you set the camera manually to, in my case, the 4K 30 frames per second to the shutter speed of 1/60, and then letting that much light in, it will overexpose it. So that's when the ND filter comes into play. It's basically a sunglass for the front lens of the camera. And the neutral density filter has a number, and that's basically the amount of light. It's a description of the amount of light that it will remove from, or not allowed to go into the image sensor of the camera through the lens. So we have an ND4, ND8, and ND16. The ND4 will reduce the amount of light by an f-stop of 2. So in photography, the smaller the f-stop, the more light is allowed in. So an f-stop of a camera lens of 2 will let a lot more light in than an f-stop of 4. The higher the f-stop, the less light goes in. So this is an f-stop of 2 in the amount of light that's reduced going in. This is an f-stop of 3, f-stop of 4, and then these are ND8, so this is an f-stop of 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the ND64 will reduce the amount of light going in dramatically. And that's could be appropriate depending on the particular situation. I ran a test run of the ND filters the other day. It was during bright daylight, and where I was filming, an ND16 was appropriate. These tend to be a bit of a educated guess based on your filming situation. And while you have the drone on the ground, you might want to get the drone, put the filter on, then look at the image exposure through the camera view of the drone to make sure it looks to be exposed correctly before you get it up in the air. If you get it up in the air and it doesn't look right, you'll have to bring it down and try the next one. Again, the higher the ND filter, the less light that it will let in, thus allowing you to get the exposure reduced down to where it should be. So I will go through and show you the proper mounting and dismounting of the ND filter or ND and CPL combo units on the front lens of the Mini 2. In this kit we have the warranty card, we have a reference to a bunch of videos that Freewell has available with a QR code that you can scan. We have a cleaning cloth here for the filters and lenses, and then we have a filter guide that goes through all the filters that are available in this particular kit. And with that, let's go take a look at how to install and remove the ND filter on the Mini 2 camera. To install one of the filters from this kit on the lens of the Mini 2 or the Mavic Mini, you need to have the drone powered off so that the gimbal is not motorized and doesn't fight you while you're trying to install this, because you do have to rotate the camera down to where it would be like looking at the ground if it were flying. And then you can engage the two tabs on the back side of the structure. Basically, you have the filter on the front or this CPL round ring on the front. This structure is the same for either one. But you have this support structure, which has a metal piece screwed to it with these two red screws. And then on the back side, we have these two tabs that are visible there now, hopefully. And then those two tabs engage two slots on the back side of the camera housing. And let's see, we have the camera basically facing forward at this point. Let's rotate it down like we're looking at the ground. And then you can see those slots on the back side. The tab on each side will go to the outer slot on each side of the camera. So let's see if I can do this. It doesn't always immediately drop in for me. I may not be 100% fluent at this yet, but basically the process is you rotate this down gently to expose those slots. And let's see if we can get that here. And then when those are engaged, you gently pull forward on that to then bring the lens filter over the lens in the front. And then it basically should kind of like snap into place. It doesn't have a big definitive snap, but it just kind of sits there and grabs on the front. You can kind of feel it as it goes over the edge there. And then that shouldn't fall off. Then of course, when you go to remove it, I would suggest pulling just ever so slightly forward and then lift up so you disengage the tabs and you don't scrape the structure here on the front lens of the camera on the drone. The first few seconds here, you can see that the camera with auto exposure settings, it looks properly exposed. I just switch it over to manual settings, and that way I can set the shutter speed and ISO to the appropriate values to capture that motion blur. So ISO is at 100, shutter's at 1/60, because I have my 4K 30 frames per second on my video capture. And you can see that the exposure meter is plus 2.7, so it's very overexposed in this particular situation. But if you're wanting to capture that motion blur effect in your video, you need to have settings in this configuration, at least for 30 frames per second. And you can see it's grossly overexposed. This is just not usable video at all. So this is a demonstration of the fact that an ND filter is very beneficial in this situation. So I'm going to get the drone back down and put on the ND filter and show you that example next. And with the ND16 in manual mode now, the 4K 30 frames per second, shutter speed 1/60th, following the 180 rule, it looks really good. So let's get it up in the air. Start recording.
Take off. The home point has been updated. Please check it on the map.
Looks much better. So that's the beauty of having an ND filter. You can get cinematic footage, getting the natural motion blur in place. So let's get it up, see if we can see the mountains. Checking for planes. No planes, no birds. "50 feet above ground level." I hear a plane nearby bringing down.
Landing.
So we can see with the cinematic footage being desired, the ND filter installed on the front of the lens made the video nice and appropriately exposed. It shows that we're just a 0.3 overexposed according to the meter on the DJI Fly app. But again, we're maintaining the 4K 30 frames per second and ISO 100 and shutter speed of 1/60th, maintaining that cinematic look for the 180 rule. This is flight number 2 with the ND filter on. And off in the distance we can see the mountains. Let's see if we can get a digital zoom on that. A little more visible, 2 times digital zoom, 4K 30. Some birds being interested in the drone, so let's bring it down. As you could see in the video that I captured from the Mini 2 using the Freewell ND16 filter, I had the camera set at 4K 30 frames per second, ISO 100, and the shutter speed at 1/60 to get that motion blur in it. And since the objects I was filming were in the distance, the motion blur would occur from any movement from the drone itself. And the video was nicely exposed, and I was able to use the 2 times digital zoom without a problem, able to see the snow-capped mountains a little bit more clearly with the 2 times digital zoom used from the Mini 2's camera, and it worked very well. So if you're interested in getting a product like this for your Mavic Mini or Mini 2, check out the affiliate link that I have for the Freewell all-day 8-pack down in the description section of this video. And also check out the Amazon influencer link down there as well. I will add that to my Amazon influencer store in my drone list of products I've tested and or reviewed. And I've tested the gimbal protector on here, and it seems there's no contact between the filter and the gimbal protector. You could transport the drone with the filter still on and the gimbal protector on, but if you live in a humid or cold environment, you might have condensation that might build up there. So you may wish to remove that and store it in the original case that came with the product to transport them, and then install it at the next job site or use site for the filter. In my particular area, it's a fairly even tempered environment, and the humidity is usually very low, so I've never had a problem with condensation buildup. Keep that in mind as you use your drone. It's up to you to choose whether you want to transport it that way. I don't find any statement endorsing or warning against it from Freewell, and it seems that there's absolutely no contact between the gimbal protector and the filter, so it seems like it's a viable thing to do, but make that choice for yourself as you use it on your drone. Again, if you found that you've learned something in this video, make sure you hit that like button. It's a big important thing on YouTube to get the like button more than anything else to make sure it ranks that video higher, it's suggested for other people. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's free. Hit that bell notification to be notified when I upload new videos just like this to the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.